This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on India's role in global oil and gas value chain. The participants are Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Arya Madan Mohan, journalist.
PM Modi this evening inaugurated the 4th India Energy Forum Summit of global stakeholders and oil and gas CEOs organized by the Ministry of Petroleum and CERAWeek. Attendees from around the world are taking part in this key virtual conference. So Narendraji, at a high level, what are India's key aims now?
As you know that we are among the fastest growing economies in the world. We are also among the fastest growing energy powers in the world. There was a time when we had really made efforts in order to attract all these CEOs and important oil and gas industry leaders to India. But now the picture has changed. India is being recognized as among the fastest growing economies, as also as among the most attractive oil and gas investment destinations in the world. We are the third largest consumers of crude oil today. We are among the large consumers of natural gas today. And when people look at the potential of oil and gas over the coming 20 and 30 years, we are almost on the very top. So the result is that, all major companies and all major oil and gas players from around the world, whether public sector, private sector, international, or big or small, they all want to now basically come to India. And many of them are already here for two reasons. First, because we are a democracy. We have got a kind of legal system that they trust, they believe in, and we are a kind of market which is absolutely global in size and global in terms of standards. So they get this comfort that they are looking for. And at the same time, when you look at the demand for oil and gas in the coming 5 years, 10 years, we are among the most attractive market in the world.
If you look at the production numbers from India, actually we are declining for the last few years, and we probably desperately need to find more local production sites and exploitable reserves. What is, in your view, the key aspect here?
When it comes to oil and gas, especially in terms of reserves, you are blessed with it or you're not. Saudi Arabia is blessed, Iran is blessed, Russia is blessed. We are not that blessed, unfortunately. And at the same time, we need more oil, we need more gas in order to eradicate poverty in the country and also to actually expand our economy. So unfortunately, we are in a kind of situation where our dependence on the imports of our crude oil and now increasingly even natural gas has been rising rapidly as we grow faster. Right now, we are importing roughly 85% of total requirement of crude oil and roughly 55% of our total requirement of natural gas. On the one hand, the government has come out with new initiatives in order to exploit oil and gas reserves. In India, most of them are now in deep water and ultra deep water in the Bay of Bengal and in the Arabian Sea. So our companies and the government has come out with the policies. The foreign players are also coming in. Billions of dollars are being invested in order to exploit oil and gas in India's own basins, whether onshore or in the sea. But at the same time, when you look at our demand, it looks like that probably our dependence on imports is only going to grow. Even if we are lucky and find more oil and gas within the country, our dependence will only grow just because the present government is very keen to make energy available to every single Indian. You have seen that in case of Ujjwala scheme, where the government went out of the way to ensure that every household has got access to LPG, and bulk of that LPG is being imported. So I think with the government focused on this, that every single Indian must have access to affordable and the amount of energy they need. I think our dependence, unfortunately, is also going to grow. But at the same time, domestic production, wait for another 2 years, will also go up both on oil and gas. But again, that will not be sufficient to meet the demand, especially when it comes to the rising demand in the country.
Actually, it's a very interesting industry sector because potentially after more than 100 years of primacy in terms of fossil fuels, we are moving away from fossil fuels, at the same time towards renewable and sustainable resources. And at the same time, we are moving from oil consumption and perhaps dirty fossil fuel consumption like coal to cleaner fossil fuels like gas. So there's a huge churn. How are we going to manage to bridge this gap if we continue to have a government structure which is defined on the basis of ministries of coal, ministry, renewable resources, etc.? So shouldn't there be a single overarching ministry of energy now?
Basically, what you are referring to is energy transition. Right now, our dependence on fossil fuel is now in the region of 90%, which means that 90% of source of energy that we are consuming in the country is coming from either coal or oil or gas or other fossil fuels. And the government, as part of the policy, has made it very clear that India wants to move in the direction of more and more renewable energy. That includes atomic power also. And you have seen today, India is among the top countries when it comes to investment in the solar power sector. We are actually leading the world in a way when it comes to solar power. But that said, at the same time, looking at the size of our population, looking at the size of our economy, this transition is going to be actually gradual. So in other words, if we will continue to consume more coal, at least for another 25 years, we will need more oil, at least for another 30 years, we will need more natural gas for at least another maybe 40, 50 years. And at the same time, we will be pushing ahead with renewable energy, including solar and nuclear power. So this transition in case of India is going to take minimum 40 years before we see bulk of our energy is coming from renewable and the size of coal is more or less disappear, and oil and gas also are kind of on the verge of disappearing. But it's going to be a long journey. So therefore, this idea to have a one kind of integrated ministry for energy sounds very good on paper. But I think since the DNA of every single vertical I mentioned, coal, natural gas, atomic power, solar, wind, and is so completely different from each other, I think for foreseeable future, we need these ministries because these ministries also work as a regulator and they specialize in this particular area. So I think in the case of India, integrating all into one to create a kind of umbrella ministry, at the moment, this is a very good idea, but I don't think this will really help. I think we need to follow a more realistic approach, and I think the government approach at this stage to strengthen these ministry when it comes to India is probably the right thing.
The commitment that we've made as a country level is that we will be 40% away from fossil fuels in our total energy mix by 2030. I know that Germany has said that they're going to be 100% into renewables by 2030. But in terms of us, we have a 40% target. Now, at the present, as you had said, our renewable sector is not very significant in terms of overall power output or consumable output. So how do we bridge this?
This idea to have kind of 40% of total energy coming from renewables is a very good idea. And I think since we are a densely populated country, we need to work as aggressively as possible on bringing down carbon emissions for our own people. Forget about the Paris deal. We are an important signatory of the Paris deal. But more than that, we need it for our people, our children, our grandchildren, for our climate. But that said, at the same time, I think we also need more energy for our people. We have roughly 60% of people who want more energy. So I think we have to strike the right balance. Our focus should be first more than make sure that every single Indian has access to affordable energy. Number two, access should be that we go back to at least 10% GDP growth rate. And at the same time, we use oil, natural gas or coal in such a way that, the contamination of air or land or water is the minimum possible. So we employ the best available technology as part of the transition.
Our production and our usage of fossil fuels could be reduced by a significant amount by blending with ethanol or new technologies with ethanol bagasse or with jatropha. What do you have to say about these technologies? After all, Brazil blends 27% to 30% of their overall petrol gasoline with ethanol and reduces carbon emissions as well as import requirements.
I think, importantly, we have to keep in mind as part of the energy security, we have to reduce our dependence on imports as much as possible. Unfortunately, oil, we can't reduce much. Unfortunately, on natural gas, we can't reduce much. But in terms of coal, we can do that. So use maximum possible Indian coal. We are blessed when it comes to coal. A Brazil comparison, in my view, is a little bit far-fetched in the sense Brazil has vast mass of land and they can do that. But in our country, we need, for instance, agriculture products which we can convert into ethanol also, but for consumption. So we have to write this strike balance such a way the farmers are the beneficiary and oil and gas industry is also the beneficiary, or we import more ethanol. My personal view is that if we are really spending more on ethanol and at the same time spending more on better technology to make sure the petrol and diesels are refined in such a way and the car engines are such that contamination of air is minimum possible, I think we'll be able to achieve that target. But at the same time, in parts of India where we can go for production of more ethanol, by all means we should be doing that.
Right. So one side is the production of energy or fossil fuels which can be used to drive industry and cars, etc. The other is the use of that, and that I'm talking about energy efficiency. So what are we doing to increase the energy efficiency so that effectively we are using less and effectively doing more with what we have?
I think the best is that we use the best possible technologies. Indian consumer, by and large, are very, very prudent when it comes to consumption of energy. If they are in the room, they switch it off because they know power is expensive. The same goes for motor vehicles and so on and so forth. But what we need to do is that a lot of energy is lost in transmission, like in the power sector. Loss of energy is lost in transportation when it comes to oil and even natural gas. So we need to invest more in terms of better technology and better system so that transmission losses, transportation losses, and losses when you are starting an engine and shutting down the engines are the minimum possible. And that can be best achieved when you train the people best and at the same time you employ the latest possible technology. When you look at the Government of India's efforts and the efforts of also Government of India's big companies, including power companies and oil companies and natural gas companies, I think we are among the very best in the world in terms of energy conservation. But as I said earlier that we have miles and miles to go and we need to make sure the energy consumption and energy efficiency is among the very top in the world. I mean, it's a work in progress, but we have miles to cover.
So LED bulbs as well, I think that has caused a huge reduction in use because they're now 11-watt bulb or LED smart street lights. They've actually reduced the energy consumption quite significantly.
Yes, you pointed out, I mean, we are kind of now the LED gurus in the world in the sense the way we did it. And at the same time, we completely changed the economics of LED. Now, countries, they have been very keen to learn from India's experience. So the same way when it comes to Ujjwala scheme where we have made LPG available to practically every single household across the country. So developing countries from Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, they've been coming to understand and to learn how can they do it for their own people back home. Yes, so LED was a revolution and we can be very, very rightfully be very proud of that.
Sir, there is a well-recognized rejigging of the geostrategic realities in the world today. USA is withdrawing to some extent from the Gulf, and therefore you're seeing new groupings and strategic positionings emerge. What are we doing to diversify our strategic sourcing of crude oil to enable safety and security for the Indian consumer in the future?
Well, interesting question. If you look at, for instance, the Government of India's policy ever since Prime Minister Narendra Modi, India has diversified. Earlier, our dependence, 2/3 of our total crude was coming just from one geography known as the Middle East. Now you look at, for instance, we are importing crude oil from so many geographies, and the idea is basically as part of the energy security strategy, so we can reduce our dependence on any one particular geography. It can be Middle East or it can be other part of the world. So today we are importing oil from Canada, from the United States, even from northern part of Europe, from Mexico, from Africa, from Latin America, from Australia in some cases, and Southeast Asia as well. I think that's the strategy for a large importer like India. It works very well. At the same time, we are investing billions of dollars overseas to acquire oil and gas fields, which means that we go acquire oil and gas fields there and bring that oil back to India. So we have done that in Russia, we have done that in Latin America, we have done that in Africa, and now our company, especially ONGC Videsh, is hunting for more such opportunities across the world. So it's all part of the same strategy, but when it comes to Middle East, India's companies and Indian government presence in the Middle East is only growing in order to secure reliable energy sources for our country, but at the same time, to strengthen our bonds with Middle Eastern countries, most of them are energy surplus.
So finally, I'd just like to ask, strategic petroleum reserves, the USA has enough for around 64 days or 144 days at optimal extraction. Now, we have enough for 10 days. Is this sufficient?
Well, to be precise, we have enough for 13 days. We are in the process of taking it to up to 30 days. But at the same time, we are very close to the Middle East. I mean, if we can invest more money there and build a kind of deep strategic relationships with countries like Saudi Arabia and Abu Dhabi and a few others, then I think our reserves are kind of our reserves and they are just physically located there. So there are many ways to work on it. One way is, of course, to build the similar, capacity in India in terms of reserves. But at the same time, we can buy more oil and gas assets overseas and treat them like our own reserve, which China has done to some extent. So I think there are several models, and I think the government is working on all the models practically. So when it comes to oil supply to India, I think the government is taking care of it. We don't need to be too anxious about it.
Right. So I guess paraphrasing you, it's all a work in progress. We're moving strongly ahead, and within the next 10 years, we will be probably much more efficient, and our people will get cleaner energy at a cheaper price. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on India's role in global oil and gas value chain. The participants were Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and R. A. Madan Mohan, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our website, newsonair.com. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.